Welcome back, Deep Divers. Today, we're going to be, we're diving deep into this whole idea of a calling.
Oh, yeah.
But, and this is important, we're not just talking about your job, right?
Okay, yeah. Very good.
We're talking about, like, your purpose, like, what makes a life, truly, like, matter.
Right. Fulfilling, yeah.
Yeah, fulfilling. And our guide for this journey is Jeff Goins and his book, The Art of Work. It's pretty great.
I just started to love it so far.
It really challenges, I think, a lot of the, I don't know, the stuff we hear all the time about, like, following your bliss.
Yeah, oh, totally. Like, it's all just going to magically appear.
Exactly. And it's not like that, is it?
No, not for most of us, anyway.
Right. This book, it's more about, like, it acknowledges that the whole process of figuring out what you're meant to do, it's messy. It's not always, sunshine and roses.
Yeah, there are definitely some bumps in the road.
But it's in those bumps, those, like, unexpected twists and turns that we often discover, what we're really made of.
I think that's what makes this book so powerful, you know?
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't sugarcoat things.
Totally. And Goins uses some amazing stories to illustrate this. Like, there's this triathlete who finds his purpose after a brain tumor,
Wow.
and a woman, right, who helps people write goodbye letters. And in doing that, she finds her own healing.
That's incredible.
And then there's this coffee company, right, in Burundi, and they're basically, like, transforming a nation.
This is what I love, how he brings in all these different examples,
Alex
right?
has stories for everything. It's so good.
Yeah.
But before we get lost in the stories, maybe you can tell us, like, what's the main point? What's Goins really trying to say here?
Well, one of the things that really stuck with me is this idea that he calls accidental apprenticeships.
Accidental apprenticeships. I love that.
Right. It's all those those unexpected moments, right?
Yeah.
The things that happen that kind of shape us, and well, often they kind of point us in the direction of our true calling.
So it's not about waiting for that, like, perfect opportunity to just fall into our laps.
No, no, no. It's more about like being open to the learning experiences that are happening all around us.
Like, all the time.
All the time. Even in those those everyday struggles, even our failures, those can be accidental apprenticeships too.
Huh. That's interesting. So how does this actually work in practice? Like, give me an example.
Okay, well, think about like Walt Disney. You know the story about how he got sidelined from his paper route because of a nail in his boot?
Yeah, I think I've heard that one.
Well, that seemingly small thing, that nail, led him to discover drawing.
Ah, I see. It's like a chain reaction.
Exactly. And it eventually, well, it gave us Mickey Mouse and this whole entertainment empire.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, be ready for those weird twists and turns, because you never know where they'll lead.
That's the beauty of it. You really don't.
The book opens with this really powerful story about this young athlete, Garrett Rushmiller,
Oh, yeah, I remember him.
and he's diagnosed with a brain tumor at only 10 years old.
Oh, gosh, that's awful.
It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But what really struck me was how his dad responded.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
He didn't dwell on what what could have been.
Right.
He chose to focus on what was still possible, even with this devastating diagnosis.
And Garrett seems like such a strong person.
He is.
Yeah.
But I think his dad's attitude, his mindset, played a huge role in how he navigated that whole experience.
Totally. It's like even in the face of something so difficult, you still have a choice.
About how you approach it, yeah.
Yeah. You can choose to focus on what you've lost, or you can look for what's still possible, and that can make a world of difference.
World of difference. So for someone listening to this, what do you think they can take away from Garrett's story?
Well, his circumstances are obviously very extraordinary, but I think the principle applies to all of us. It's about recognizing that our mindset, the way we view challenges, has a massive impact on how we deal with them. And that ultimately, it shapes the outcome.
Yeah, it shapes the outcome. We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Faced with setbacks, obstacles, and it's tempting to just give up.
Oh, absolutely. It's so easy to just throw in the towel.
But maybe, just maybe, those moments are actually opportunities to, like, build resilience.
Ooh, I like that.
Like, what if they're actually accidental apprenticeships in perseverance?
Yeah. It's like you're being trained for something bigger, even though it doesn't feel good in the moment.
Right, right. And Goins uses another story to kind of illustrate this point. He talks about Ginny Fang. She became a mother at 23, unmarried, and the way society treated her.
I know, it was awful. I felt so much for her.
It's heartbreaking. But what's amazing is how she took those challenges, the judgment, the financial struggles, and she like turned them into fuel.
She did.
And she became so
Yeah, an
successful.
entrepreneur, right.
Yeah. And it wasn't like she planned it. This wasn't some conscious decision.
No, it was more like the skills she developed during that hard time, they became the foundation for her later success.
So another accidental apprenticeship.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, she wasn't actively looking for these lessons,
Yeah.
right? But life threw them her way, and she learned from them. Resilience, resourcefulness, the importance of human connection.
And those things became her toolkit for success.
Yeah.
It's like there's a pattern emerging here.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's not about sitting around waiting for some big revelation, is it?
Not at all.
It's more about realizing that our struggles, what we're going through right now, they're shaping us for something bigger, even if we can't see it yet.
That's such a powerful way to think about it. What stands out to you the most about this idea?
I think about all these successful people, right? And so many of them have these stories about failure, about hardship.
It's true, yeah.
It's almost like those experiences were essential to their later triumphs. Like it couldn't have happened without them.
I agree. And Goins really dives into this in the next section, which is all about painful practice.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And he uses the story of Stephanie Fisher, that American Idol contestant.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Auditioned 7 times.
Can you imagine the nerves?
And some of the feedback from the judges was, let's just say it was pretty harsh.
Brutal.
But she kept going back. And it makes you think, right,
Ooh, wow.
like maybe those Idol judges never realized that their criticism, even if it was harsh, maybe it was actually pushing Stephanie towards like her true calling.
It's an interesting thought, isn't it? It's like, what if those difficult moments, those moments where you feel like you just want to disappear,
Yeah.
what if those are the moments that are actually refining us, pushing us to dig deeper and find a level of passion that we didn't even know we had?
So instead of seeing setbacks as reasons to quit, what if we saw them as like signs that we're on the right track?
It's a total reframe, isn't it? Like, think about it this way. If it were really easy to walk away from something,
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't that important to begin with. But if we keep coming back, even when it's tough, maybe that's a sign we've stumbled upon something truly meaningful.
It's like our hearts know, even if our heads are trying to talk us out of it.
I love that. And that brings us to a story that really challenges this whole take a leap of faith thing, Goins talks about this couple, Ben and Christy Carlson. They moved from South Africa to Burundi to start a coffee company.
No, I don't know if I'd say that wasn't a leap of faith. Packing up your life and moving to a completely different continent to start a business? That sounds pretty risky to me.
You're right. Maybe it's about how we define a leap of faith. It's not about being reckless, is it? It's more about, like, having a vision and then taking steps toward it, even if there are unknowns.
So a leap of faith, but with intention. Like you do the planning, you do the research, but you also accept that you can't know everything in advance.
Exactly. And the Carlsons, they demonstrate this perfectly, I think. They saw an opportunity, they put in the work, and then they took action.
And even then, I bet things didn't go perfectly according to plan.
Oh, no, not at all. There were definitely bumps along the way. But they were flexible, they adapted, they learned from their experiences.
So it's not about having all the answers before you start. It's more about trusting the process and being willing to course correct along the way.
Absolutely. And I think that's a crucial part of finding our calling. It's an ongoing process, not a one-time event.
We're always learning, always evolving, which kind of leads us to these pivot points that Goins talks about, those moments where we're forced to change direction, sometimes because of failures, or maybe just because life throws us a curveball.
And those pivot points, my friend, that's where things get really interesting. When we talk about these pivot points, we often think about the big stuff, right?
Yeah, the major life changes.
Right. But what about the smaller ones, like the less obvious course corrections? Those times when you realize, okay, this isn't working, and you gotta, shift gears a bit.
It's like those micro adjustments.
Yeah, exactly. Like little tweaks that keep you on track. Those subtle whispers of intuition.
You got to be paying attention to those, though.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about staying open to feedback and, recognizing that your path isn't going to be a straight line.
And sometimes those pivot points come from, from failures. Like things just not working out the way we planned. Goins tells that story about Matt McWilliams. Remember?
Oh, yeah. He was the one who went from barely finding work to running this huge online marketing company.
Right. But it wasn't an overnight success story, was it? He had all these setbacks, false starts. I think he even worked at a pizza place for a while.
He did. Which is kind of amazing when you think about it. Like all those struggles, maybe they actually gave him the tools he needed to succeed later on.
Hmm. Another accidental apprenticeship.
Totally. I mean, Goins even talks about how Groupon came about from a failed philanthropy project.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah.
So sometimes what we see as failure is actually, what, a redirection?
Exactly. It might feel like you're going backward, but maybe you're just being pointed in a new direction, one that's, even better than what you originally imagined.
So it's like theme alert, right?
Yeah.
Embrace the unexpected, whether it's those accidental apprenticeships or these pivot points disguised as failures.
And that's where this idea of the portfolio life comes in, which I think is so relevant these days.
Yeah, can you explain that a bit? I think some people might not be familiar with that term.
Sure. It comes from Charles Handy from his book, The Age of Unreason. And it's basically the idea that your work life, it doesn't have to be just one job. It can be like a collection of different things.
So multiple side hustles.
Kind of, but it's more than that. It's more about like approaching your work and your life in a way that's more holistic.
Okay, I see. So it's not just about having multiple gigs. It's about how those things fit together, how they create a whole picture.
Yes. Like an artist's portfolio, showing all their different skills.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And I think it resonates with a lot of people, especially now. Like, we're not all meant to fit into that one job for life mold anymore.
No, not at all. The portfolio life lets you kind of break free from that and say, hey, it's okay to have multiple passions, multiple interests.
And to let those things evolve over time, right?
Exactly, because we change, our interests change, and our work should be allowed to change with us.
But being honest, the portfolio life, it's probably not for everyone.
You're right. It definitely takes a certain type of person. You got to be organized, self-aware.
And okay with uncertainty, right? Because if you're juggling multiple projects or income streams, there's going to be some ups and downs.
Oh, for sure. It's not a magic bullet or anything,
Yeah.
but if it's something that appeals to you, something that feels right, then it can be incredibly rewarding.
It's about building a life that works for you, that aligns with your passions and your skills. And in a way, isn't that what this whole idea of a calling is about?
I think so. It's about finding that place where your unique gifts meet the needs of the world.
And sometimes, finding your calling means taking a step back from that narrow definition of work and looking at a bigger picture, like Goins does with that story about Mr. Holland, from the movie.
Oh, Mr. Holland's Opus, such a great film.
Right. He's this music teacher who, dreams of composing a symphony. But life throws him a curveball, and he ends up, teaching high school music.
And he struggles with that for a long time, right? He feels like
Yeah.
he's not living up to his potential.
Yeah. But then there's that moment at the end where he realizes that the impact he's had on his students, that's his real legacy.
It's beautiful. And it reminds us that a calling isn't always about like achieving some big goal or getting external recognition. It can be about the quieter things, the everyday acts of service.
Like how we show up for the people in our lives.
Exactly. And I think that ties back to Goins' emphasis on those accidental apprenticeships. It's about being open to learning from everyone we encounter, not just those we consider, mentors or experts.
And being willing to find those lessons in the most unexpected places.
Yes, that's what makes it so exciting, isn't it? You never know where that next lesson, that next clue is going to come from.
Goins shares that story about Ed, remember? The guy who dedicated his life to serving others at a homeless mission?
Oh, yeah. He didn't have a fancy job title or anything, but the impact he made was incredible.
It's like proof that you don't need to have a big calling to make a difference.
And it's a good reminder that our culture's obsession with productivity, with achievement, it can be a bit misleading.
Yeah. Sometimes the most meaningful work is the stuff that's not flashy or Instagrammable.
Right. It's about showing up with compassion, with generosity, even when it's hard, even when nobody's watching.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious, what's sticking with you? What are some of the key takeaways so far?
Well, for me, it's that idea of embracing the unexpected. Like your calling, it's not always going to be this straight line.
Right. There are going to be detours, pivot points, maybe even some wrong turns.
And that's okay. You have to be open to it. Trust that even when things feel messy, there's a bigger plan unfolding.
And pay attention to those little nudges, right? The whispers of intuition that tell you, hey, this feels right, or this feels wrong.
Yes, those are your guideposts. And don't forget about those accidental apprenticeships. You're always learning, always growing, even when you don't realize it.
So stay curious, keep your eyes open. And for those who feel a little overwhelmed by this whole calling thing, remember the portfolio life. Maybe your purpose isn't one big thing. Maybe it's a collection of smaller things that fit together.
And most importantly, remember that a calling, it's not just about your job. It's about how you live your life.
Hmm.
What impact are you making on the world? What kind of legacy are you leaving behind?
And that legacy, it's not always about, the big achievements. Sometimes it's about the quiet, consistent things we do every day, the acts of kindness, the way we show up for each other.
So, as we head into the final part of our deep dive, let's keep all of this in mind. And let's see how we can actually put these ideas into practice in our own lives.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, mindset, those accidental apprenticeships, the portfolio life. It's a lot to think about.
It is, yeah.
But I think there's this like underlying question that we haven't really addressed directly.
What's that?
How do we actually find our calling? Like, where do we even start? It can feel kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
I know, right? It's like this big mystery we're all trying to solve. But Goins actually offers some pretty practical advice, and it's not what you might expect.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, he says that your calling is often less about like doing a specific thing and more about becoming a certain kind of person.
Becoming rather than doing, huh?
Yeah. And he uses the story of Samuel in the Bible to kind of illustrate this. You
Mm.
know, the boy who hears God calling but doesn't really understand what it means at first.
Oh, yeah, I remember that story. It's funny because I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling. Like we know we're meant for something, but we're not sure what exactly it is.
Exactly. And the thing about Samuel's story is that his calling didn't come with a detailed plan, right? It was more about listening, responding, and trusting. Trusting in something bigger than himself.
So it's less about having a crystal clear vision of the end goal and more about like paying attention to those inner nudges and taking small steps in the direction they lead us,
Yeah, you got it. It's all about cultivating that inner awareness, that inner voice that whispers, whispers about what feels right, what feels meaningful.
which I think can be really hard, right?
Yeah.
In a world where everyone's telling us who we should be, what we should be doing.
Oh, absolutely. Learning to trust your own inner compass, it's a skill. It takes practice. It takes courage too.
Yeah, the courage to choose what feels right for you, even if it doesn't make sense to everyone else.
Exactly.
I've definitely had those moments where I've ignored my gut feeling, and it always seems to lead to situations that just feel off, like I'm not where I'm supposed to be.
Oh, I hear you. We've all been there, right? But maybe those experiences, as frustrating as they can be, maybe they're actually teaching us to listen more closely to that inner voice.
Yeah, it's like, hey, pay attention. This is important.
Right. So listening is key, but it's only the first step. What about that responding part? We can't just sit around and listen, right?
Right. So how do we respond? What does that look like in practice?
Well, it means taking action, right? Even if it's just a small step. Remember the Carlsons, the couple who started the coffee company in Burundi? They didn't have it all figured out at the beginning. They just had an idea, a passion, and they started taking action.
And it wasn't all smooth sailing, was it? They had to deal with setbacks, challenges, and moments where they probably doubted themselves.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But that's where that painful practice comes in, right?
You're going to face those tough moments no matter what you do.
Exactly. And maybe the willingness to go through those tough moments, to embrace that painful practice, maybe that's a sign that you're actually on the right track.
Like if you give up too easily, maybe it wasn't really your calling after all.
I think so. It's like the resistance, those challenges, they're a way of testing your commitment. They help you separate the fleeting interests from the deeper passions.
Which makes you wonder, right? What have we all given up on too easily? Maybe some of those abandoned projects, those dreams we put on the back burner, maybe some of those were actually pointing us in the right direction, but I don't know, we just weren't ready to put in the work.
It's something to think about for sure. Is there anything you've given up on that you're kind of, rethinking now?
Honestly, I've always loved writing fiction, but life got in the way, you know, Job, family, all that. And I just sort of let it go.
But you're thinking about it again now.
I am. This whole conversation, it's making me wonder if maybe I should give it another shot.
That's awesome. What's one small step you could take to, dip your toes back in?
I think I'm going to dust off some of those old stories, the ones I started years ago, and just commit to writing for like 30 minutes a day
Yeah.
just to see what happens.
I love that. It's all about taking that first step, even if you don't know exactly where it's going to lead. Who knows? Maybe this is the start of your accidental apprenticeship as a novelist.
Huh, maybe. But speaking of those pivot points, the ones we were talking about earlier, it seems like a lot of them come from those moments of failure, or at least, disappointment.
That's true. Failure, it's something we all try to avoid, but what if we looked at it differently? What if instead of seeing it as an ending, we saw it as our redirection?
Yeah, like a course correction.
Exactly. It's like, okay, this didn't work out the way I planned, but
Huh.
what can I learn from it?
Mhm.
How can I use this to move forward in a way that's, more aligned with my true path?
It's about approaching those moments with curiosity instead of like beating yourself up,
Then sometimes those pivot points, they lead us to a path that's more multifaceted, like we were saying about the portfolio life.
right? Maybe your calling isn't just one thing. Maybe it's a combination of different things that you love and that bring you joy.
And remember, like with Mr. Holland, your calling might not always fit neatly into your job title. It can show up in all areas of your life.
Yeah. It's about how we show up for the people in our lives, how we contribute to our communities, how we use our unique gifts to make the world a little bit better.
It's about recognizing that all those little things, they matter. They all add up to something bigger.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the art of work, I think the big question we're left with is this. What will your magnum opus be? Like, what kind of legacy do you want to create?
That's a powerful question. And remember, the work is never really done, is it? There's always room to grow, to learn, to contribute. So keep exploring, keep listening to that inner voice, and keep believing in the power of your own unique calling.
Goins says it best, I think. Every single thing that has ever happened in your life is preparing you for a moment that is yet to come. So, embrace the journey, trust the process, and don't be afraid to pivot when you need to.
We'll be back next time with another deep dive. But until then, keep seeking, keep striving, and keep making a difference.